Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very warm welcome to another edition of Life Matters, and we're looking into the parenting sector. And as in Life Matters, every show we explore the issues that shapes our lives and our communities. So stay tuned, because this week we're shining a light on a critical issue that is everybody's business: child protection. Joining me are two experts that are very much involved in the prevention and healing of protecting children in every aspect. Firstly is Dr. Shaida Umar from the Teddy Bear Clinic for Abused Children, and part of their mission is to minimize harm and prevent secondary victimization to children and their families when entering the child protection system by providing expertise, information and education, as well as support, in order to make their journey that was quite traumatizing a healing and meaningful one. With me as well is Zaytoon Rabbani, Executive Director of Child Safe SA, who will be profiling a little bit later on in the show. Together we'll delve into the challenges, successes and the ways to get involved in keeping our children safe. I'm Khawa Solomon, so stay tuned and don't forget to interact with us in this edition and in every parenting or health edition of Life Matters. We want to hear from you. How important is maybe even child protection? Are you talking about it? Is something that you are sitting down in, at the dinner or the lunch table to speak to your children about the stats? I had a chat to someone and they didn't even realize that child trafficking was real. They thought it was just some false idea that people were talking about. But yes, these things are happening around us all the time. Now let's welcome our guest. Firstly, we have Dr. Shaida Umar from the Teddy Bear Foundation. Assalamu alaikum to you, Dr. Shaida, and welcome to the show once again.
Shukran dalilan and walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi. What an excellent and great opportunity.
Child protection is what we're going to be chatting about with Dr. Shaida. But let's also notice our second guest online, all the way from the Western Cape, based at the Red Cross War Memorial Hospital, is Zaytoon Rabbani, Executive Director for Child Safe SA. Assalamu alaikum to you, Zaytoon.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and shukr for this opportunity.
We'll chat to Zaytoon a little bit later on as well to profile this organization and shine a light on how they are protecting our loved ones. So let's get into the discussion with you, Dr. Shaida. Firstly, let's address the idea, the intersectionality of child abuse, considering the factors like race, gender, class and disability, as well as understanding the root causes of child abuse, such as poverty, substance abuse, and also the mental health issues that does involve child abuse.
Well, so I think I just want to, alert the communities out there to the fact that this is Child Protection Week, Child Protection Month, coming, leading up to the International Day of Children in June. And the focus is on awareness raising, conscientizing, and ensuring that people understand the rights of children, that the basic rights are fulfilled under Article 28 of the Constitution, but also looking at the Children's Act, Section 38 of 2005, which looks at promoting the best interests of children, the underlying ethos looking at preservation of the family, but also identifying children that are at risk, children who are unsafe, and children who are in need of care. So just for people to understand, and I think you so beautifully articulated that child protection is not your business, it's not my business, it's our business. And this is why we are having this conversation. But just to remind everybody that child protection is not about Child Protection Month or Child Protection Week. It's child protection all the time, 365 days, and that each and every one of us have a responsibility to ensure and protect children from any ills, harms, dangerous situations, risky behavior. I think at the end of the day, it is an implicit right that children have, which we are failing to provide in light of the many challenges and adversities that you have alluded to. If we just look around us, children are faced and surrounded by neighborhood violence, a culture of violence. Children are faced with other adversities where they are directly victims of alcohol and drug abuse within their environment, sometimes a history of victimization. So we break down that history of victimization. We're talking about physical abuse. We're talking, so corporal punishment constitutes physical abuse, and it is a criminal offense. I think many homes, many families still continue to believe that they have a right to reasonable chastisement. Unfortunately, the legislation is very clear on this, and it constitutes a criminal offense. But also looking at neglect, where children are subjected to purposeful and deliberate neglect, not the situational neglect, where parents do not have means to take a child to seek medical care if the child has been ill for a long time, or to receive any other kind of medical support. So with deliberate neglect, the means are there and they do not access the resources that are available. With situational neglect, it's something that's out of the control of parents. But also to identify what you reflected on child trafficking. If we look at child trafficking is a reality that we are all faced with. It's something that we are in denial of. However, it's not just the very rich and affluent that are faced with this scourge of violence against children. We know there are organized syndicates, crime syndicates, that are now targeting your middle-income families as well, knowing fully well that when a child's life is threatened or endangered, parents and families will make a plan and will fulfill the ransom that is made or requested by the kidnapper. So that's something that we also need to be aware of. But child abuse and child protection, a lot that we are currently seeing on the ground is the bullying and the cyberbullying, and what that leads to, the ripple effect. We are seeing cases of completed suicide by young children within the primary school settings and even in the high school settings. So I think just to reflect on the landscape of child protection, of safeguarding children, and the challenges that we are faced with in ensuring the safety and protection of children.
So from your side, Dr. Shaider, what are the most effective strategies for prosecuting child abuse cases? What role does organizations like yourself, the Teddy Bear Clinic, play in supporting survivors or the children who are maybe who have witnessed rather the domestic violence or any other traumatic events? What is the process in the healing and recovery while balancing, the rule of law?
The important, first and foremost, is about containment of the victim or the survivor, ensuring that they get the necessary support for healing to take place. So getting the support, the intervention, so they feel contained before they can actually proceed further. And they need to feel safe and feel that they can trust the organization, the mental health professional that they have been referred to. I think that's the first port or point of departure. However, once that happens, the rest will follow, I think, smoothly in terms of referral. Reporting structures are important. Reporting to law enforcement, SAPS in particular, and the offshoot of SAPS, the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Unit, who deals specifically with cases of violence inflicted on children and families. So it would be reporting and then taking the next step. So looking at strategy, it's not a piecemeal solution. Of course, it's thoroughly thought out and expected. So once a case has been reported, a statement taken, a criminal case then gets opened where a CAS number is allocated by SAPS, and for further prosecution, it will then be taken to the National Prosecutions Authority, to the prosecutor at the court, who will look at the merits of the case and then make a judgment call, a decision on whether the case will go onto the road, meaning that will the case be tried in a court of law. Now, the way the NPA works is that they look at cases where there's a strong probability of getting a conviction. So 95% and more, that there's a strong probability of getting a conviction. We do not support that. We certainly want every case to get that opportunity. Unfortunately, that's how the NPA works. So that is the process and the strategy. However, looking at the victim's family, because the victim does not exist in isolation and is nested in systems, we also need to provide support and containment to the family to extend the therapeutic process outside of the therapeutic setting so that there is continued support and that healing continues to take place outside of therapy. So families are also equipped, enabled, and empowered on how to respond to the victim and also how to manage the victim and what steps they could take if they find themselves in a position where they feel that the child is out of control or the child is collapsing emotionally. So just looking at the process and procedure, that is the strategy that is applied. But even when a case goes to trial, what is important that the child and family continue to get therapeutic support outside of the court process. But for a child to go to court, they require court preparation. Now, that's not teaching a child what to say, because that would be seen as contamination of evidence and it would be considered as inadmissible in court. It's about teaching the child to understand and appreciate, recognize the difference between a truth and a lie, but at the same time, knowing that he or she has rights, that they are in a position to say, if they cannot remember, I can't remember. I don't know. I'm not sure what happened. I'm tired. I need to eat something. I need a break. So these are things that we take children through, rehearsing, role-playing, using age-appropriate activities to familiarize them with the court procedures and the personnel in the courtroom. So to allay and alleviate their fears. Like you said in the beginning, our role and responsibility is to ensure that we minimize any further trauma or secondary victimization of the child. So by preparing them for court, they are more equipped, they would feel more confident, and they would be able to testify, whether it's in an open court or in a special room with an intermediary who would be the go-between the court and the child. So that's the whole strategic process and procedure that we would follow, but ongoing support even after a case has been finalized, a post debrief, and also an evaluation if further support is required.
So, Dr. Shaida, I also want to understand, the highlight of men and boys and how we need to engage them before it even happens, prevention and support efforts. Just after the short break, we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Shaida, but also profiling Child Safe SA. More about them just after the short break. Stay with us. In this Child Protection Month, we're keeping our children safe every day. We have online Dr. Shaida Omar, Clinical Director for Teddy Bear Foundation, as well as Zaytoon Rabani, Executive Director for Child Safe SA. And that's who we're going to be chatting to now as we profile this organization, Child Safe SA, a remarkable organization dedicated to creating a safer world for our children. So Zaytoon, assalamu alaikum and welcome back.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and shukr.
Let's start with an overview of Child Safe SA. Can you share your vision, your mission, a bit about the history of Child Safe SA? I see you also have a range of initiatives, including referrals, early childhood development sector. One that I saw highlighted quite a bit is pedestrian safety. Can you tell us more about each of these, as well as how they contribute to Child Safe's overall mission?
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to echo and support what has been said by Dr. Shaida. I think it's very important that we not just wait for a particular week to shine a light on these issues, but as you mentioned earlier, it is everybody's responsibility, and I think we need to collaborate more and do more and create the awareness, because so that we can keep our children safer. And the vision of Child Safe, as you pointed out, is to create a safer world for children. And we do this also through our 3 strategic goals that we are focusing on, and that is around the agility and sustainability of the organization, as well as the reduce the preventable injuries. That is a very big component of who and what we are. And then another aspect is definitely advocating for child injury prevention in the broader sense to keep children safe. ChildSafe is a child injury prevention non-government organization, and we are based on the premises here of the Red Cross War Memorial Children's Hospital. We're an independent NGO body with our own governance structures and with our own programs that we are initiating and implementing. But we do work very closely with the hospital, and the injury prevention, awareness and education and capacity development are key focus areas of what it is that we're doing. The history of ChildSafe, it was born out of the fact by the previous heads of the trauma unit here at the Red Cross War Memorial Children's Hospital, going way back, because we're now 45 years in existence. And it was like a deep need to do something from these surgeons, finding a child that's been through, let's say, a motor vehicle collision and ending up on that trauma, on that operating table, having to stitch together that little body. And they felt that there's something needed to be done about it. And it was way back when the Child Accident Prevention Foundation of Southern Africa was established. And recently, in 2008, it has changed to be known as ChildSafe South Africa. So the focus is purely more on prevention, education, and awareness of the preventable injuries. But I think it's also important to make a distinction between what do we mean by intentional injuries and unintentional injuries. So the intentional injuries are those that are deliberately inflicted. And interpersonal violence also plays a big role in that sphere. And then the unintentional or accidental injuries is sustained in the absence of the intention to do harm. And it's normally classified according to the cause. For example, what we look at there is the falls, the burns, the road traffic incidences, drownings, and poisoning. We have So we keep track of the trauma data that comes through the hospital, and we always focus on what are the sort of, like, for the lack of the use of a better word, the main culprits in the preventable incidences. And here we will find definitely ingestions, poisoning. We've read in the paper about what is also happening there recently now in the Gauteng among schools, how the ratics gets into, play areas, children ingesting it and falling ill. So it is ingestions, poisoning. We have road, the motor vehicle accident as well as the pedestrian accidents. We have burns. This is our silly season here in the Western Cape in terms of winter and burns. That's on the increase. And then we also have falls of the little ones. And then also we have the road accidents, the falls, and the burns that is taking place. And our focus is on having those individuals referred over to ChildSafe from the hospital so that we can do that referrals and the child and home safety counseling to make them aware of all of these incidences that is taking place so that we don't have a repeat of them ending up at the trauma unit again. And we provide them with resources so that they can take that back to the communities as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Zaitoon. It's clear that ChildSafe SA is tackling some of the most critical issues affecting our children's safety. As we continue to mark Child Protection Week, how do you see your work intersecting with the broader child protection efforts, and what opportunities do you see for collaboration and synergy, improved collaboration and proactive information sharing between the different agencies as well as organizations involved in child protection?
I think, that is a very, very good question that you are posing. If I can just share, there was a paper written on violence, injury and child safety, the new challenge for child health. It was led by then board member of ChildSafe, Ashley Panikak, and Professor Shanaz Matthews, who was then part of the Children's Institute. So there was a whole conversation that was held around that. And one of the things that came out really clearly is sort of like what is needed to promote a coordinated national child safety agenda. And I think that is what is also sorely lacking within our efforts in whatever we are doing in the different spheres that we find ourselves in. Child Safe South Africa is doing one aspect. We have the Teddy Bear Clinic in their specialist field doing one aspect. We have governmental departments. We've got other social development agencies and community agencies doing their work. But one of the big wins that we need to go for is exactly what was recommended in that paper. How we draw all of these collective efforts together. And I think of late, you know, we have the National Childcare and Protection Policy that became policy around 2019, a beautiful guiding document, but yet we are finding that the intentional, the unintentional incidences are still on the increase. Dr. Shada has also mentioned, you know, from the abuse perspective. We are find even statistics show that this is on the increase. The gender-based violence incidents are on the increase, and children also get caught in between those issues. Yeah. So it's a big challenge that we are not having coordinated efforts. And I think from the child's perspective, a new focus would be how do we advocate more for the protection of our children? And that would be also lobbying the decision makers, the government people, working with social community agencies to see how do we get together and how do we speak with one voice to enhance the safety of our children, but that including of the parents and the caregivers and the community workers.
So Dr. Shada,
lots of work.
Yeah. Absolutely, definitely. An organization like yourselves is needed, especially to have a wing like that at a children's hospital, and understand that, you know, if that need arises, Child Safe SA is there to depart the necessary information. But Dr. Shada, if I could bring you in quickly and just quickly understand some of the, as she said, as Zaytoon said, mentioned the education, you know, rallying up communities and other organizations. Let's look at cultural and societal norms that perpetuate child abuse and neglect. How can we engage, especially the men and boys, in the prevention and the support efforts given their crucial role in ending child abuse, and rather advocating it and protecting the child?
So, all very important. I think for far too long we've left the boy child out, and the belief or the misperception that boys do not get abused. If we look at stereotypes, the gendered norms and values, where boys are supposed to be very macho and masculine, not allowed to cry, they're expected to assert themselves and, of course, use whatever force. It's all part of the socialization process. And if we look at the strategy now, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals of including the boy child, and if we look at the African Charter, it speaks to leaving no child behind. So leaving, you know, we've left the boy child behind, and we've got to bring the boy child, because boys are victims too. And if we want to see a transformation, if we want to break down the toxic masculinities, we need to get the boys and men on board to champion the fight and scourge against gender-based violence. So the strategies that are being utilized are gender-based violence dialogues in communities. At schools, we are addressing sexual reproductive health and rights, speaking to girls and boys leadership clubs. We've been running and facilitating girls leadership clubs for the longest while, and once again, it's been an erroneous omission, and we've realized that we need to bring boys on board, and that boys also experience pain and trauma, and that they need to be given permission and a platform to express and articulate. Because if we want them to have deeper insight and develop empathy, feeling what it feels like to be in a position of victimization, we need to bring them into these conversations, into the bigger dialogues, and to bring them into solution-focused thinking. Because as we speak and how we've dealt with in the past, they've been on the receiving end where they've been described and labeled as the perpetrators. And we have to change that mind shift or mindset around gender-based violence. So it's be more inclusive and less exclusive. So by being inclusive, it's more empowering, and in the past when we were exclusive, it was least empowering. So I think this is the way that we are going now in our outreach work, getting boys to come up with solutions, getting girls to engage, to share their experiences, their pain, their trauma, and through role plays and role reversals and engagement, they are in a stronger position to realize and develop a deeper level of understanding of what it feels like and what it means to be in the position of a victim.
So after the short break, I want to look at some of the issues that needs to be tackled on the ground in the community, some law-regarded questions to Dr. Shaida, but we have the two experts online talking to us about child protection, one from the Western Cape and one based out here in Gauteng. Please do interact with us. We love how you always make the show, and it could be content for our next show. Do continue watching Hilaal.tv on our live stream as well. So tell your family and friends if they are anywhere over the lands and across the beautiful seas. Back in a moment. Welcome back and a very good day to you. Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us. Child protection, keeping every child safe every day, is our highlight for this month of child protection. We have Dr. Shaida Umar from the Teddy Bear Foundation, as well as Zaytoon Rabani, based out in the Western Cape, for Child Safe SA. So Dr. Umar is a clinical director at the Teddy Bear Foundation, and Zaytoon Rabani, executive director for Child Safe SA, working in the community, as we heard, to reduce and prevent injuries to children through research, education and advocacy. Now I want to go back quickly to you, Zaytoon, and sort of understand, with the work on the ground that you guys do and in the community, what are some of the effective ways to engage with and support, especially those marginalized or hard to reach populations in the child protection efforts?
Thank you, Hawa. I think it is very important, whatever we do as an agency, that we do it in collaboration with the communities and include those affected in the interventions that we want to bring to the fore in the communities. From the child safe work, working within the marginalized communities, especially with the work that we are doing in the developmental space with early childhood development teachers, our preference is to support the marginalized communities because they are the ones with fewer resources. They are the ones that are more prone to the drivers of poverty. Our communities, most of our support base, they lack the infrastructure, they lack proper housing, and they don't have proper road safety mechanisms with traffic calming measures. So it's those communities that we want to focus on, to bring them into our training spaces when we do the 2-day training that we do with early childhood development practitioners. We take them through the process of what it is that we are finding that's evidence-based about the top incidences of why children end up at the trauma unit, and then the education around that. And we target the early childhood development centers because our focus is on the children 0 to 12 years old predominantly, but the 0 to 6 within the ECD community, and educating and sharing with them and capacitating them with the information about what they can do in terms of keeping the children safer at the ECD centers. So the program spans around the developmental stages of 0 to 6 years of the child. We talk about the incidences that occur, and we also bring in the aspects of, for example, burn management within the ECD center. It also entails road safety education as well as first aid training. Now, the first aid training is a big component of this training because a lot of these ECD centers, they pop up within the informal settlements, within the informal communities. Now, our question is always, I mean, why not those communities? Because it's those communities that struggle to get their registration processes from not being registered to partially registered to becoming actually registered. And there are a lot of tick boxes and that they need to comply with in terms of municipal regulations. And one of our outputs is how do we support them with our developmental work for their benefit is also the first aid training. So when they come onto our training, the first aid certificate is also a very important one because we focus on first aid in general, pediatric first aid, and they get a level 1 certificate, which is valid for 3 years, which also helps those practitioners to say, oh, right, we do have a first aid practitioner also on our premises. And we also provide them with resources and we follow up. We collaborate with social development professional officers to see how we can have ongoing support to these individuals, because the big thing is once we get an ECD center, there are social service organizations that's also in community to support them. Once an ECD center moves from non-registration to partial registration to actual registration, they actually have rights to access norms and standards and support from the Department of Social Development and the Western Cape Education Department's ECD Directorate. And that is why we want to focus on those communities as well.
Yeah.
And for them to take it back within their communities so that the multiplier effect takes place there.
Let's start on the ground. There's lots and lots of government still needs to support when it comes to the ECD Centre. So thank you, Zaitoon, for sharing the valuable work of Child Safe SA. It's inspiring to see organisations like yours leading the way in creating a safer, more nurturing environment for our children to thrive in and focusing on the little ones. So Dr. Shaida, if I could just quickly come back to the law. How do you think the law should evolve to better address the complexities of child abuse and neglect? And how can we ensure that children's voices are heard and their testimonies are taken seriously in legal proceedings? You have mentioned this, the kind of support that is available to them. Does that help aid in their voices to be heard?
So, firstly, we have the best pieces of legislation in place. If we compare ourselves to the global north and global south, South Africa has excellent pieces of legislation. I think where we fall short and are failing is in the implementation. We are signatories of the African Charter, the European Union, the UNCRC, the United Nations Child Rights Convention. So I think we need to be aware that everything is actually okay. We are okay, but it's the people that are not are failing to respond to or apply what is expected of them. If we look at, and I think this is a systemic concern, it's not just labeling or playing the blame game. If we look at, and I think Zaitoon, my learned colleague, alluded to the fact about collaboration, coordination, and integration. And that is where, if we look at the different pieces of legislation, they actually do not speak to each other. So there's a breakdown with our government departments. If we look at the Department of Social Development, certainly the Children's Act, which is something that we all are regulated by, promoting the best interests of the child, preservation of families, and looking at children in need of care or at risk. But then if we look at what the trends that we are faced with within the South African context, where children are violating other children, they are murdering, and they are sexually aggressive towards other children. So those children fall under the Child Justice Act. And then, of course, sexual offences fall under the Sexual Offences Act. But then if we look at Department of Health, I just think I need to unpack this so people can understand the anomalies that we are faced with, that if we look at termination of pregnancy, it could be any age. Legally speaking, we speak to 12 years, but we know that 10, 11, and 12-year-olds are falling pregnant, and they do not need consent of their legal guardian or their primary caregiver or caretaker. Yet if we look at the age of legal consent to engage in sexual activity, we speak to 16 years. And then so this falls under Department of Health. And then any surgical procedure, one has to be 18 years or they need the permission of their legal guardian. Yet with the TOP, you can see there's a contradiction there, termination of pregnancy. And if something goes awry or there's a complication with the TOP, then because it requires further surgical intervention or intrusive or invasive intervention, then they need the permission. So you can just see the pieces of legislation are not speaking to each other. It's actually contradicting and not promoting the best interests of children and actually not helping to heal and help the children out there in terms of safety and protection. So I just think how it's important for us to look at the practices on the ground, unfortunately, are not working. If we look at law enforcement, the resources that they have on hand, as I mentioned earlier, are few and far between, and they are overwhelmed with volumes of cases. So they, as much as they only do what they can do, realistically speaking. They do not have sufficient vehicles, they do not have sufficient staff, yet they have these high caseloads. The same thing with the prosecution and the courts, the backlogs of the DNA evidence. We know that with COVID, there was over 250,000 cases. Yes, that was reduced, but we are still faced with backlogs. And if we look at load shedding, so many cases that children's court cases are postponed because of load shedding. The cameras stop working, and then there's technical hitches in the courts that we've worked with. They need technical assistance. So cases get postponed, and there's a bottleneck with cases. So children are then subjected to secondary victimization because that wound is repeatedly reopened. And of course, one needs to think of the financial constraints, the practical constraints around schooling, academic achievement, etc. So I just thought that this is important for me to address and broach the real picture that we are faced with.
Some interesting facts that we don't actually look at, and after the next quick break, Dr. Shada, we're going to delve into, technology, and I want to bring in technology and how it does play a role in child abuse, how we can protect our children, and also understand the ethical and moral complexities of child abuse. Why are we not getting involved? Why are we not reporting? Why are we not supporting the children or the victims so that they don't become victims of secondary victimization, as Dr. Shaide alluded to? So after the short break, we continue the conversation of child protection just after this. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. A very good day to you, and remember to tell any of your family, friends or colleagues if they want to catch our shows right now, if they want to listen and watch now, they can do so on the World Wide Web, www.hilaal.tv. Otherwise, they can catch our shows, any of our missed shows, on our YouTube channel, and we're also launching our app, so see that soon coming up. So welcome back. With me is Clinical Director for the Teddy Bear Foundation, Dr. Shaida Omar, and that is Teddy Bear Foundation for Abused Children. And part of their mission, as we understood, is to minimize harm and prevent secondary victimization. So we also chatted to Zaytun Rabani, who is Executive Director for Child Safe SA, working in the community to reduce and prevent injuries to children through research, education mostly, and advocacy. So let's continue the conversation. Zaytun, if I can just come back to you. I was watching one of your videos, and very importantly, one of your board members elaborated on any suspicion of child abuse, neglect, and harm that needs to be reported. So what are the legal implications for individuals who fail to reduce suspected child abuse or neglect, as well as supporting, encouraging and empowering young people to become advocates and leaders in child protection efforts, and how can they play a positive role in creating change?
The Children's Act, there are specific guidance, especially when it comes to the professionals like the doctors, the police, teachers, school principals. that there is an obligation, they are required by law to report incidences of abuse or neglect, and failure to do so is a criminal offence. When it comes to the parents and caregivers, there's a moral obligation to also highlight the issue and seek the necessary interventions to report those matters. Because as Dr. Shada also mentioned before, I mean, abuse is abuse. That is a major trauma in itself, and trauma remains with you for life. But the secondary abuse, when it comes to when these matters are being dealt with and investigated, that is where the steps in, which is even more traumatic for the individual. I think it's also, maybe if I may just mention that, I mean, Dr. Shada, you're the better expert in this field, but in terms of the law and conviction rates are also quite poor, because many cases are thrown out or dismissed due to lack of evidence or failure in the procedure during the investigation. So I think it's also important also just to maybe create bigger awareness around educating the people that we are working with and those relevant ones to say why it's important for individuals to know, especially in the case of gender-based violence and sexual assault and assault on children, that they are aware of the Special Family and Sexual Violence Unit at the South African Police Services, because there are specific roles and specific ways that these things need to be done, collecting evidences and all of that. So just, to create an awareness around that as well. So we don't just go to any police officer and make a statement and then on technicalities, have you done this, have you done that? The child has been sexually assaulted, but now you first take the child to go and have a shower before you take the child now to go and see the doctor. I think that's also important to create awareness around those issues and that, because as much as we want to prevent these incidences from happening, I think it's also important that we focus and do the right thing so that we can move towards proper prosecution of the perpetrators of these heinous crimes as well.
That's some important aspects, Dr. Shaida, that Zaytoon, picked up on, and being in the industry, they find the loopholes that some of these cases have actually fallen through when they need to be convicted. So give us information, help us understand as community members, as individuals, when we are faced with certain situations of abuse, of neglect, or when it does come to having to go and visit the police station for that. What do we need to know to protect the child?
Well, I think most importantly, I just want to remind everybody out there that when a child comes forward, remember, it takes a lot of courage for a child to come forward. The conversations around abuse is not a social chit-chat. So the bravery and courage that the child comes forward, we need to firstly believe the child and respond timelessly, adequately, and appropriately. So the first step would then be to report it, to say to the child, I'm sorry this has happened to you. I'm glad that you've shared this with me. You're very brave, you're very courageous. I'm here to help you, but I need all the information. And of course, report it to the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Unit, where they will take a statement from the child and a criminal case is likely to be opened. So I think that is the first step that people need to follow through. However, you are absolutely correct, and Zaytoon alluded to the fact that it's not common knowledge, and one is not expected to know that if there's any evidence that the clothes must be put in a dried paper bag, paper packet, to prevent any kind of evidence disappearing, and also to ensure that the victim does not bathe or wash himself. Now these, and therefore it is critical that within the first 72 hours, a child is referred to a medical facility, whether it's a Tutuzela Care Center, an emergency facility, for a medical examination, for a J88 to be completed, which is a sexual assault kit or any physical evidence of any form of abuse, where they then take the evidence and it's all reported and reflected on in that document. And once they've completed it, it's sealed and submitted to law enforcement. The IO, the investigating officer, will then take it further, and that evidence is then presented to the prosecutor. So just so that the public knows that one has to follow due diligence. And if you're not sure, to the public, please do not hesitate. contact the Teddy Bear Foundation, contact Childline, contact the Gender-Based Violence Command Center, also a toll-free number. Now, these are facilities you can reach out to get the relevant information to guide you and support you through this process.
So Zaytoon, our time is running up, and I just want to elaborate that you guys are an organization that is there, that also not just is there to help people, but also needs help from communities. What message would you like to share with our listeners about the importance of collective action and responsibility in preventing child abuse and protecting our children? How can individuals and organizations get involved with Child Safe SA's work, and what opportunities are there for volunteering, donating or partnering with Child Safe SA?
I'd just like to close with the vision of Child Safe South Africa to create a safer world for children. Keep children safe is not Child Safe's responsibility. It is a collective responsibility from each and every one of us. Just like road safety is a responsibility of each and every one of us. There are opportunities to get involved. There are opportunities to get on board with our training, do inquiries on info@childsafe.org.za. You can also come forward in terms of if you want to support, whether it is from a financial point of view. You can go onto the Child Safe's website. You can look at the activities that we have there and see how you can support. And also, there are also, when we look in terms of the governance structures of the organization, very importantly, that there are specialists that can play a role and make a difference in the lives of children. Collective efforts is what's needed, and the call out there is for each and every one of us. Do not treat our 2-year-old toddler as if you are a 2-year-old young adult. The minute you remove your sight of our children, that is when these incidences take place. You have a responsibility. Our children are placed as an amanat. They are trust within our hands. So together, we need to keep our children safe.
Beautifully said.
Do your part.
Beautifully said, Zaytoon. Always an amana. We come back to that. Allah has given him to us to look after and care for. Dr. Shaida, quickly, we've got a minute to wrap up. How can we all play a role in creating a safer world for our children? What message would you like to share with our viewers about child protection and the importance of getting involved in this critical issue of balance, the need to protect our children with the need to support and rehabilitate perpetrators, especially particularly in cases where they may have been victims of abuse themselves?
So my parting message is always engage with your children, communicate, dialogue. Start talking to them when they have vocabulary. Talk about safe and unsafe touches, acceptable and unacceptable behaviors, good and bad secrets, and replay that, rehearse that with them so that they start understanding. But they also understand that they have rights and responsibilities, that it's okay to say they've been hurt. And they need to be heard. Not, when they hurt, they need to be heard as well. Yeah. So my parting words is communicate. But also what Hawa alluded to was that, perpetrators have a history of victimization. So the important message here is that behind that bad child or mad child, there's a sad child. And we need to reach out to each and every child, regardless of who and where they come from, because nobody's exempted from this scourge. Regardless of race, class, creed, socioeconomic status, we are all affected by this and we all need to be involved. We cannot bury our heads in the sand. We all have a responsibility, and as so beautifully articulated, children are our amanat. We need to respond to it according to that. Shukran dalilan.
Dr. Shaida Umar from the Teddy Bear Foundation, as well as Zaytoon Rabani from Child Safe SA found in the Western Cape. Shukran so much for your time, and assalamu alaikum until we speak again. Keep up the great work. We do appreciate you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
And of course, thank you to you for tuning in to today's show on child protection. It's a complex but crucial issue. With your expertise and dedication to these organizations, and they of course need your help, like Teddy Bear, the clinic, Teddy Bear Foundation and Child Safe SA, we can all make a difference. Remember, every child deserves to be safe and loved, even if they are not ours. Remember the children of Palestine, as they are also hurting. So if you or someone you know is affected by child abuse or neglect, there is help available. You could reach out to the resources we share today or contact local support services. Let's continue the most important dialogue and work together towards a safer, brighter future for all our children. Join us next time on Life Matters. A parenting and human potential expert, Nikki Bush, and we find out why primary school children are challenged with being addicted to their devices and what they're talking to her about this matter. Please join us next time on Life Matters. Stay informed and engaged. Remember that your life matters. Wassalamu alaikum and goodbye.